Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the February 15th, 2018 DDR Downtown Design Review Committee meeting. As always, first order of business, please ensure that your cell phones are either off or in vibrate. And then we will start with a roll call.
Corey Bates.
Present.
Nathaniel Harding.
Present.
Charles Ainsworth. Anthony Black.
Present.
Julie Kriegel. Deborah Richards. Present. And Connie Scothorn. Present. You have a quorum.
Thank you. Assuming everyone's had a chance to review the minutes from last meeting, are there any comments or a motion?
I move to approve.
Do we have a second?
Second.
That was a Scothorn Harding motion. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. We have no cases withdrawn. We do have one continuance request. It is for item 6A, 512 North Broadway Avenue, and they are requesting it be continued to the April 19th meeting. So we'll need a motion to continue that item to the April 19th meeting.
Move to continue.
Second.
That was a Harding-Scothorn motion. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? So item 6A is continued to the April 19th meeting. We have no items on the consent docket, so moving on to cases for individual consideration. Item 6B, 704 West Reno Avenue. Is the applicant present? If you could, please come forward, and after staff presents the case, please state your name for the record.
Good morning.
Morning.
This is a request for renovating an existing building that had been used as in kind of a warehouse use, and it is being turned into a microbrewery. The issues that we had in the staff report, there are a couple, there's one item that's going to need a variance, and there's a couple of things that we pointed out that were not in keeping with guidelines. Currently, this building fronts on Reno Avenue, and it is, you're seeing there the front facade, and as you can tell over time, some of the storefronts have been taken out and filled in. We have a guideline about entrance off the street, about a street presence being inviting to the pedestrian. The applicant has laid out their project in reverse so that the back of house, their equipment, is going to be at the Reno end, and their front of house customer side is going to be at the alley end. So they are not wanting to put the storefront, the glass door, and the glass back in the storefront windows, because they have a concern of people seeing in and seeing the high-dollar equipment that they have inside. And that's one or two of the guidelines that we have listed in there. We are excited that somebody's doing something to a building that had sat there for a while. They're on a corner, and they're going to be making use of that area, as you can see from their site plan. One of the other issues, and let me get to their drawings, and this one is going to require a variance, is the size of sign that they're proposing. Bear with me. As you can see from the upper drawing here, and let me blow it up some, they're proposing to put they're allowed one sign because of the zoning district that they have. They're proposing it on the Reno facade. It is based on the width of the building. They can have half of the width of the building. The width of the building is 50 feet, so they're allowed a 25 square foot sign. What they're proposing is around 90 square feet, which is much larger than what's allowed. While staff is comfortable with a larger sign, not quite that large, and so what we recommended that they do is, if they limit the width of it to be directly above the garage door, and then proportionally reduce it, and I did a rough calculation, reduce it down to about it's like 60, a little over 60 square foot. We felt it would fit in better with that front facade, the size of the front facade. And you can see here what they're proposing with putting in metal panels where storefront windows would go. So if you have any questions, otherwise I'll,
So in the staff report,
I'm sorry.
under the recommendation,
Yes.
there are conditions that are part of that recommendation?
Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you for reminding me. And so what staff recommendation is, one, that they reduce the size of the proposed sign to be no wider than the overhead garage door, as I mentioned, approximately 62 and a half square feet. We feel very strongly that they shouldn't turn their back on the street, and so we're recommending that they install storefront windows and a glass door on the Reno facade, recognizing that there's other ways that they could protect the view into the building, such as internally have some type of a barrier up so people can't see the equipment, and then obviously the condition that they obtain a variance for the size of sign that they're requesting.
If you could state your name and present whatever you'd like.
Christian Scorsoni, TCS Construction, acting as general contractor on behalf of the owner, our client. So I guess we got the two different cases, the sign case and the storefront case. I'd like to start maybe with the storefront case. So as Laura mentioned, the visibility of the equipment, all our water lines, everything's exposed copper, exposed conduit, everything's kind of that industrial look. He has a pretty penny and some equipment sitting back there, and with as the site plan shown, we're planning on having the back of house, like she mentioned, on that north side. Then the public access there on the south side in anticipation of the Oklahoma City Boulevard eventually coming through that south side. And then as far as the signage goes, I think we get 25 square feet. I think once you get that 25 square feet up on the building, it's going to shrink rather quickly. And we do want to have people know that he is there and operating there. I think once we get the beer garden, everything's there. It's really going to dress that corner up quite nicely. And so we'd like to have the signage, obviously, I think it's you said 90 square feet, and then do a architectural horizontal metal panel instead of the storefront system. So it would be a hollow metal door with a 6x24 vision light, and then the horizontal panels as shown right there in that north elevation.
Okay, so your position is in line with what was submitted in the drawings?
Correct.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
Yeah, how does somebody approach the building? Like if they park their car or are walking there from a neighboring building, how are they going to enter if, because the building is kind of facing the alley? So I'm just curious, what's the approach?
Well, so being that it's a beer garden, it all has to be, fenced off. So they would approach the building from the south side through a gate in the fence. Will be required to fence off where alcohol consumption is being taking place. That has to be fenced off, and so the only public access will be on that east side. Will be that storefront. Will be be a 6-foot double door storefront door, and then there'll be a single door there on the southwest side, just to the left of that garage door.
So to enter the building, they walk down the alley and then
Well,
into a gate that's facing the...
Yeah, there's a sidewalk on Lee that
Okay.
runs north and south. So
Okay. So they enter from Lee.
right.
So I couldn't get the hand working. So you're referencing this sidewalk, and then this area doesn't have a fence, correct?
Right.
And then you were referencing the door into the
Okay.
building here, and you were referencing the gate here to get into the beer garden and the double door into the building from here, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Although that whole south area is called out for sod, so they would be walking across the sod to get to the building?
Yes. So our owner's from the UK, and in the UK, a beer garden is exactly that. It's a place, very outdoor, grassy place, and so that was kind of his goal, was to have it seem like you're outside, not necessarily walking on pavement. But yes, they would be walking through a grassed area.
I don't believe that meets the requirements for accessibility by a wheelchair. So it may be something to follow up on.
Okay.
I think that one of the things that you're going to see when you get open is that your first days, and then once the alley is opened, like I guess that's the intent, is you're projecting that that's going to open, that's going to become a primary entrance, and that's the way you're going to advertise yourself. Currently, you've got an address on Reno. So somebody who's coming from not the immediate vicinity, or if they're coming for the first time, they're going to go to Reno. And then they're going to go and they're going to see the sign, they're going to approach the front door. And it's going to be a little bit confusing in that regard. I agree. I think there's a lot of creative ways to handle making a building appear to be a front, storefront, spandrel, ways that can still be fully opaque from the inside, spandrel glazing within a storefront system, or some kind of internal type of barrier visually. And I think that that would be successful. And then you could handle signage at a pedestrian scale that could direct you around to the back. I like the idea of the garden, and there's lots of options, I think, for accessible, non-concrete paths that you could look into. But I think that your opening day success is going to have to realize that the primary approach from everybody is going to be the Reno side, especially if you have a Reno address. I like the project. I like the project a lot. I think a couple of things, a couple of very small things to work through, and then I think you'll have something really nice.
I think another thing that might help your argument is if in the elevation you show the fencing and the beer garden to the left, because we can't, and because there might be some kind of entrance there might be some kind of beautification aspect that is inviting and active that you can see from Reno, but we can't see it in the elevation. So in that case, I might imagine that maybe you could just have one, maybe you might make the argument that you can have one glass window in that storefront and like hide things behind the other solid panels that you have. But then when we see like the beer garden fence and how inviting it is and exciting, that, you know, that might be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with the stance on not turning your back on Reno. That even if the owner wants to orient the main entry of the building to the south, that doesn't mean that Reno would get its back, you know, the building would turn its back on Reno. In that situation, in my opinion, it just becomes a 3 facade building, and that Reno, how the building addresses Reno should fall within the guidelines of the district. And so in that realm, I support the city's recommendation to make that storefront. And I agree that the signage location is going to create confusion. You know, to put the main entry of the building to the south, but the main sign on the north is, you know, is going to confuse people. Relative to the sign that you're proposing on the north, I do agree with staff's recommendation as far as the size, scaling that down to match the width of the garage. That would seem to be in more proportion to what's there.
The original design actually had more signage, and they had a sign on the south facade, but in this zoning district, each tenant's only allowed one sign. So they would need a variance for number of sign if they wanted to increase it to 2, as well as the size of sign, and they chose to put it on the north facade above the door. So I just wanted to, because originally they did have more signage shown.
Even with the width of the garage door, it's still going to require a variance.
Yes,
So having a single variance that encompasses all aspects of current and future signage would be beneficial to your owner. one variance application, one payment. With the signage on the building, is it relative to lot line length if the entire site is developed, or is it relative only to the building facade?
The size of the sign is to the building facade.
So one other thing that hasn't been discussed is the landscape. That's why I'm here. I think that you need to do a complete landscape plan because it's kind of fuzzy right now. And in particular, you've addressed St. Augustine grass for your grass, and that doesn't grow here. So you probably want to look at giving us a real landscape plan instead of TIP. TIP is a great thing, but it doesn't tell us what you're going to plant there.
In regards to that, just the storefronts on the north side, would it be, would we be able to maybe, so it would be the east side where that door is now, to make that an aluminum, storefront system door? Like Anthony said, with the spandrel system, we could make something that you wouldn't be able to see through, and then leave that west side, if we could do that with the architectural metal panels. So rather than doing both openings with the aluminum storefronts, it would be...
Okay, so you're talking this
Right,
this
the one with
side.
the door, correct.
Because on the site plan, they've got, it looks like a double gate that is in close proximity to the corner of the building, I believe, going back to what you said about if they had possibly something here with the fence could become inviting and carry over to that side of the building, which is, I believe, what
Right.
you're...
I think if we saw that elevation, it would be helpful. And then we could then discuss during the meeting whether the additional window is needed or not.
Is this time sensitive? Would you be willing to continue this so that we could incorporate the landscaping plan, the elevation that shows the extension all the way to Lee, some kind of a paved surface to your primary entrance, the reduction in the signage, and how you're going to handle your signage variance, whether it's a single variance for one sign on the south side or on the north side, or multiple, and then come back and present it as one item?
I mean, it is a time-sensitive item as far as if we're going to need to get a storefront system. I'd need to get, obviously, that ordered and installed. We're on a timeline as far as his equipment shows up at the end of March, and we're halfway through February, and I don't know when the next meeting...
It's March 15th.
It'd be March 15th. So the signage, I think we could get that elevation change, and that could probably be something that could happen at a later date. But as far as the windows and what is going to happen with that, I would say is sooner the better. But
Well, we would be looking to you right now to either be open to continuing this item, or if your preference would be for us to vote on it as is today, or with whatever motion gets made relative to the project.
and that vote would be either doing the metal panels or the
Well,
storefront system.
I don't know yet. It depends who makes the motion and what conditions that motion includes. So I guess we would ask, would you be willing to continue the case to make some of the modifications that have been discussed, or would you want the case to be voted on today?
I probably would have to have it voted on today, just as from a time standpoint.
So then, just to continue the conversation in regard to your proposal to provide storefront at one side of the north facade but not the other, it would be my opinion that that's not the best solution, and that, given the building's facade and the symmetry that's part of it, you would want both of those opens to be symmetrical and the same.
I agree with Corey. I think that if we can't see what the fence looks like, I would have to also think that having 2 storefronts on either side would be better.
So I think there's a number of items here to address, and I guess, does anyone have anyone from the gallery would like to speak to this, please? If you could state your name, please.
Jason Johnston. I'm here on the Mayor's Committee, Disability Concerns. That's why I'm here every month. Just the grass entry alone is enough to continue, not vote for this case today. I mean, that itself is a significant issue to me, not to mention the other issues that you mentioned. So I would say I would be against this proposal just because of that accessibility issue.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Any other comments or questions from the committee?
Regarding accessibility, I mean, when they do submit for a permit, they will force them to put it in. So even if we approved with recommendations, they're going to have to address that.
Right, and if there are that or other building permit concerns, if anything else changes, that would have to come back for a revision. It's typically at an administrative approval level at that point, but yes, the permit desk may ask for other changes.
I guess at this point, do we have a motion? I will say to the applicant, based on the conversation and some of the points that have been made here, I think it would be in the applicant's better, it would be a better position for the applicant to continue this case versus potentially seeing it get denied via vote. That would be my recommendation at this point, just to keep the ball rolling. I mean, is there any?
Well, yeah, I'll explain that a little further. If it's denied, the soonest you would be able to come back with a new application would be for the April meeting.
So with your recommendation of having it be all storefront systems, I mean, so if this elevation gets denied today, and the recommendation is to do all storefronts, then we have to come back and do another rendition of this with the storefront showing the elevation?
Well, okay, one of their options would be, staff is recommending that you do storefront system on
Right.
Reno. So hypothetically, if they voted to do that, then that would be your approval. Or they could vote to deny what you gave them. So if it's your approval and you want to do something different, you would have to submit another drawing, and we'd go through this exercise again. If they deny it and you resubmit to address their concerns, as Lisa said, the earliest you could get back before them would be in April because you've missed the March deadline. But you do have the ability, if you will accept a continuance, it could be on the March docket, because they can do that. So you could address some of their concerns.
And that would be providing new drawings, showing the landscape plan, the fencing details.
Some of that we could do all of that or some of that. We could do the most important parts of it that we're discussing to me, and I'm not slamming landscaping, but to get your building, the work you want to do in your building would be addressing the building-related items.
Not to, hopefully this will add clarity and not confusion. The committee could, our staff recommendation was to approve the smaller sign, approve storefront instead of metal, and to recommend the variance on the sign. So those things could be motioned and approved if you agree with them. and then the landscaping could be continued to another meeting, because I'm hearing that the committee doesn't believe there's enough shown. So I'm just saying we could, the way we've noticed it, we could break it into pieces to let you order the storefront, continue construction, get open.
Right, so if that seems like the recommendation, or the way it's going to go is to do the storefronts, that's something that can be approved today. And if that is approved, then that's the way we can proceed. We'd be approved to take out the glass that's there now and the siding that's there now and put storefronts in, or do we have to come back and get further approval?
No, it could go one of two ways. In this particular case, if staff and the committee felt comfortable, they could allow you to work with staff on doing that.
Yes, if there was a motion and approval with the conditions that the north facade be changed to storefront and the size be reduced, or any other conditions, that approval would allow you to move forward with the building project. And what Lisa's talking about is breaking the project separate from the site and the landscaping, where the building would be allowed to proceed, but the site would need to come back for further review.
So we would just continue then the site aspect of the project at the March?
Potentially.
Potentially.
This is all, until someone makes a motion, we're somewhat speculating.
And I would just like to make one quick comment before we make the motion, that one of the elevations says that the fence is reclaimed corrugated panel, and I think that might be a typo. And it should just be...
Early on, that was the fence, and then it got changed to the wood, so I guess we probably both missed that
it.
comment.
Okay, so I just want to be clear that...
Yeah, no, and I apologize, I missed that.
The fence needs to be
Yeah.
wood, because it says it in like one spot here.
Right, because you can tell the way it's listed is horizontal wood slats for the fence, and so I apologize that we both missed that.
I'll make this motion. I move to approve the application on the basis the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in sections C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that the applicant reduce the size of the sign, the proposed sign to no wider than the overhead garage door, the applicant install storefront windows and a glass door on the north facade or the Reno facade, and that the applicant obtains a variance from the Board of Adjustments with respect to the maximum size for the sign.
Are you going to include landscaping?
With the exception of number
With
5.
the exception that all items relative to landscaping, including ADA access and any kind of hardscaping access to the building, is not included in this motion and shall come back before us at a later date.
Second.
That was a,
No,
sorry.
continue the landscaping to the March 15th meeting. We would need drawings in a week. Or to the April 19th meeting. We would need drawings in about a month.
Okay.
Which one would work for you?
I'm asking, sorry that I'm asking.
For just the landscape drawings, we could have those back to you in a week.
In a week, okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
So that'd be March 15th.
March 15th.
So simply to clarify, we have a Blatt motion that matches the staff recommendation in item E1 with the additional condition that the landscape plan and site plan come back for further review at the March 15th meeting. Is that correct?
And just to further clarify, that's item number 5 on the list. So basically, you're continuing number 5.
Got it.
Okay.
So we have a motion
Second.
and a second. We have a Blatt-Harding motion. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'd like to
sorry.
make a motion.
Yep.
Recommending approval to the Board of Adjustments for the variance with respect to the maximum allowable size of the sign at the width of the garage door.
Second.
That was Blatt and Harding. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Okay, moving on to item 6C, 631 West California Avenue. Is applicant present?
I was going to ask, Lisa, were you going to, if you, I mean,
Sorry, yeah, if you could, that'd be fine. Sorry, neither Laura nor I worked on the staff report, but we know all about it.
yeah, Michael's been helping us out, and we really appreciate that. So some of you might recall, we had a really freak windstorm, I think it was last year, and there was a building that got blown over, and that happens to be this site. The building had been there for quite some time, and it was missing a roof. So as you can see, it's a very narrow site, and we're coming in with basically an infill project, and we're very excited to actually have some building going on in addition to the renovations that are going on. So the proposal at this location, which let me get down to it, is for a building that would have, the upper floors are residential, and it has a space on the lower floor that could be retail, it could be office, it could be some other non-residential use. And because of their target market, what's included with this is on the first floor we'll also have basically garages. And you can see that right here in this area where you've got the garage doors for the tenants of the building, and they would be pulling in and then backing out onto the street. And so one of the items that you also see in here is they need a variance for maneuvering in the right-of-way. It's similar, but to a different scale of somebody backing out of their driveway at their house, because this isn't a house, this is multifamily. So that's why it falls in the category of maneuvering in the right-of-way. We raised some concerns over impact on pedestrians walking down the sidewalk when you have people backing out of their garages, because this, basically this whole side in this area here becomes a big curb cut. There is some parking as well on the back side of the building. And let me get around to this. So you can see we've got two spaces off the alley. The alley has actually been vacated, but it is still open, and almost all of the property owners still use it as an alley, although it's been vacated, and so everybody owns half of the alley. So you can see from this one where we've got two curb cuts in here, one much bigger for the garage openings, and then we have the two off the alley. They're actually on Board of Adjustment this afternoon for that variance that they need for maneuvering in the right-of-way. There were some guidelines that were discussed in here dealing with the horizontal and the vertical breaks that are required. So it was just pointed out, sometimes we see this, depending on the material that people use in the design that they have, that we end up with longer or taller than that, and we're just pointing that out for you. And we've got a new sidewalk coming in on Lee, which is what I mentioned. We do have a concern of potential impact on pedestrians. However, without those garages, I don't believe this project would have a green light to go forward, because they're integral to the units above it. So there were some building code issues that they got worked out, and have a building to capitalize on some views that they're proposing. And so staff's recommendation is approval with the condition that they get a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the prohibition against maneuvering in the public right-of-way.
Okay. Could you state your name and present as you'd like?
I'm Clint Newsom with Left Frame. I'm owner and architect. So we're trying to make the most of this narrow site. As you can see, we only have 25 foot wide. I'm trying to kind of usher in a new clientele to that area and kind of build the design presence of that area. we're marketing the condos as high-end residential, and without providing parking, I just don't think that we can market it the way that we need to. So that's kind of the biggest issue on the parking, providing the curb cuts. We're providing glass in the doors and truncated domes to alert pedestrians. As you know, as the door goes up, it's going to alert the pedestrians as well. So I guess that's kind of my case. I think that's the biggest issue that we're working through right now.
Can you go to the first floor plan? Or
The other one.
yeah, the other one that shows like all the walls and stuff in the first floor plan. I think that this building,
No, the one that, no. If you were just on it,
oh,
The site plan.
the site.
or the, yeah, it says first floor / site plan. It shows the curb cut.
That one, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Okay, let me get
I
it.
think that this building will be a good addition to this area, and I'm in favor of supporting the staff's recommendation that you could maneuver in the street. One thing that maybe could be improved a little bit is that 30-foot wide curb cut, and I'm wondering if you switched parking number 5 with the trash room and had like 2 smaller curb cuts, is that workable?
No, that actually, I've tried so many configurations with this. It gets in the way of our elevator, and so as we start to push and pull on that space, it directly affects the spaces above, and so you can't get, well, the stairwells obviously need to be where they are.
Right.
And so really that affects our elevator and our entry points
It
above.
appears that the most elevator would have to move is like 1 foot. If you switched parking spot 5 with just the trash room,
Well-
like mirrored that whole thing.
Yeah, we also get into, there's a street light right there, and you see that little box in front of on the west side? Yeah. So that's the street light box, and right in front of that is a street light, the city street light. So we're trying to keep, all the existing site conditions, and that's really what dictated a lot of those curb cuts. And we were trying to, be within that 30-foot curb cut limitation. And then by providing the 2 on the alleyway, we maximize that space, but eliminate additional curb cuts, or wider curb cuts, I should say.
Code actually allows 2 curb cuts no wider than 30 feet. There is distance separation for them, but I just wanted to mention that. So, yes, it's just under 30 feet, but there is a regulation that specifies.
Yeah, I also want to point out, I think we noted this in the staff report, and we worked with the applicant, and I don't know if it really shows, that the sidewalk zone will be continuous. So you won't dip down into a curb cut and dip back up. It'll be straight across. And the design idea behind that, it's the same way as it is in the Project 180 streetscapes, so that the pedestrian always has the right-of-way, and it's the car that has to skip a beat to kind of get over that a little bit.
So the slope of the driveway doesn't start until the west side of the sidewalk?
Correct. It's about 8'2" from the edge of that building. That's the other thing. We're kind of widening that space to give the pedestrian a little additional space there to alert them. And you can see that on each entry point, there's truncated domes. You can see the line. That's where the driveway would come up to, and then the sidewalk would be 8'2" with, cross slope and everything that is required for that.
And you mentioned that there would be some kind of alert or alarm as the door is opening?
The only thing, the garage door coming up, I think that would alert most people, and again, with the truncated domes for any sight impaired, I think that's going to be an alert. Having having the transparent glass doors is also going to help with the actual vehicular motion, checking before they have to open the door. So I think all of that kind of alerts people, but there wouldn't be any actual alert.
I drive by this every day. I remember seeing it, and I was like, oh, what a sad sight. And then one day it was gone because it literally blew over. I was amazed. But I like this design, I like this plan. As far as the pedestrian safety, valid points, but we are just talking about residential. I mean, I don't personally see it as big of an issue just because it is residential. So you're talking about one vehicle, three vehicles in that spot, as opposed to 300 or 3,000, per day. So with that, I'm obviously very favorable to this idea and this design. I think it does fill an important market need. Not that we're here to decide what the market wants or doesn't want, but it's an appropriate use, and I think it'll be a good fit for the area, and it's a good design.
Thanks. Not necessarily from a design standpoint, more for planning, I guess. Have you had any conversations with the property owner to the east?
We have, yeah, multiple. He put up a fence right there. I spoke to him after the last, I think he was here when we were supposed to be here, but apologize for that too. But his only concern was, he asked me how high the railings are going to be on the balconies. So that's really the only thing he had. He's been pretty favorable of the whole thing. Like I said, he put up a fence, so it's he kind of sectioned himself off from us.
Okay.
It's actually, it shows up as red.
Yeah.
He built the building that was there served as part of his fence, and he contacted us right after the building blew down because he was trying to secure, he has a parking lot there. And so he came in and got a CA for this kind of red brick-looking wall that he built.
From a long-term planning standpoint, I just want to point out the risk of orienting those bedrooms to the east, right up against the property line, with the potential that somebody could develop that property, just as tall as this building and block all of that.
Yeah, we've gone kind of back and forth on that, and we think that even though it is a risk, Mike Davis, the property owner over there, has been there for years, and he doesn't plan on going anywhere. Talked to him about that specifically. We feel like that this project and this prototype, by providing those views downtown as is more valuable than not, and taking the risk of if somebody develops that. So that's kind of what drove that decision to keep them over there.
And then lastly on that facade, I can't speak with certainty, but I do know that there are fire separation requirements for distance from property line and stuff, so just want to point that out to make sure everyone's aware.
Yeah, we talked with Jeff Hines about all of that, and the setback of 5 feet allows us 15% openings on that. So that's why, or 3 to 5 feet, I'm sorry. So all the balconies are set back that 3 feet, and then 15% of that entire face there. So that's what drove. We had a lot more glass, but I'd like to put more glass, but it either has to be fire rated or allowable.
Do we have any other comments or questions from the committee? Would anyone else here like to speak to this? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the application on the basis the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District Zoning Ordinance as referenced in sections C and D of the staff report, with the condition that the applicant shall obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the prohibition against maneuvering in the public right-of-way.
Second.
That was Harding Blatt. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? And I believe we need another motion.
Move to provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for a variance from the prohibition against maneuvering in the public right-of-way.
Second.
That was Harding Blatt again. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, moving on to item 6D, 25 and 29 Northeast 7th Street. Is the applicant present?
Yes.
And if,
So, kind of an interesting layout as you see up there on the project site. This is a request to build some detached single-family homes. We haven't had that product in that area probably in a very long time. So, currently it's vacant. They have 2 lots adjacent, and then there's a lot they don't have, and then they have another lot. Also included in this is the alley, because as you notice from your staff report, they are proposing to put in part of the alley. The easement is there for the alley, but the alley was never physically put in, and the city does not maintain alleys or install them if they don't exist, so it's up to developers, builders who want them to actually install them. So they've discussed with Public Works what would be required. The entrance to the alley is there, which is what we're looking at here, but it goes to gravel. And this is adjacent, and I honestly don't know when the radio station, when that came in, but that's like the newest thing except for the Metropolitan, which is down at the end of the street. So in the staff report, we discussed, this is her layout, we discussed several things as far as there's a variance that is going to be needed, and that variance is because as currently proposed, 3 of the units would have their primary access off the alley. And there is actually a regulation that states you can't have your primary access off the alley. And so they are on the Board of Adjustment for this afternoon for that variance, and we included that in our recommendation in the staff report. So from the perspective of providing a product that we haven't seen, providing the density that we're looking for, the height that we're looking for, this project, in staff's opinion, is doing that. There is a guideline in here that talks about pedestrian entries on the street, which is kind of similar to a conversation, but from the commercial side that we had on the case on Reno. And the pedestrian entries are proposed from an interior courtyard instead of on the front directly facing the street. And with the narrowness of these lots and the garages that they're proposing, it makes it impossible to actually put that entry on the front of the house and provide the 2-car garages that one would typically find in a house like this. But the design of these houses, when you look through them, had balconies and other detailing on the front of the house that provides interest on the front of the house, so it's not just a blank wall. And staff felt that this could still reinforce the strong pedestrian to building relationship that we're looking for. And here's the layout. You've got the 2 50-foot lots, and then a lot they don't own, and then 225s, I'm sorry, and then another 25, and then you can see the piece of the alley that they would be putting in. And so staff is recommending approval, and one of the conditions is they're not showing sidewalks. She knows that she has to provide a sidewalk along the street frontage, but we are including that as a condition. I'm just going through so I can get a layout for one of the houses, as well as the condition that she has to get a variance for having primary access from the alley. And then we have the second recommendation that you need to vote on as far as a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment, and we're recommending approval of that. So let me just get to... With that, I'll turn it over.
Yes. Could you please state your name and any other information you'd like to add?
Cheryl Willingham, and I'm the owner of the property. Just very interested in building high-end luxury, single-family residential in that area.
Great.
I don't like to talk, sorry.
That's fine. I do have one question, just to confirm. The elevations that will be facing 7th Street are those that have the garage doors at the base?
Yes.
Okay.
Every unit will have at least 2-car garage, some or more, because what I'm going for is more of, I'm a luxury home builder in Edmond, North Oklahoma City for many years. I'm going for more of the real home instead of just dealing with whatever you can fit, on a lot. There's good closet space, there's great kitchens, things like that. And I feel like garages are important.
Sure.
I'm not totally in favor of having the garages facing the street front. And I feel like even downtown, there's a lot of really interesting solutions to this problem, and that we really need to try and keep the urban atmosphere. So there's a lot of really high-end luxury condos downtown that don't have garages facing the street, even with a narrow lot like this. So I am in favor of allowing access from the alley to some of those buildings. I don't see that as a problem. But I think even with those balconies facing 7th Street, when you're walking on the street, you really still see the garage door.
So I have a question about the empty lot. You don't own that and you can't own that? Because it makes so much sense for that.
I've tried, I know. I've tried. He has contacted me because he was very interested in building 2 as well. He has contacted me, but he's not interested in selling. I've tried.
And so we touched on a sidewalk at 7th Street. If we could pull up the site plans, the ones that show the curb cuts, yeah. Where would that sidewalk fall in relation to the buildings? Do we know?
Actually hadn't talked about the actual location yet.
And would that sidewalk simply stop at the edge of the property lines?
They're only required to put it in on their property.
Okay.
So you'd be looking at a sidewalk in front of the 2 lots and then a sidewalk in front of the 1 lot. So with the understanding, obviously you wouldn't want to put it across a lot that it's going to get torn up when somebody builds on it, so. Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I would be interested in knowing more about the location of that sidewalk and how it relates to the building itself. Personally, I'm not opposed to the garage doors at the main facade if the pedestrian experience at that garage is taken into consideration, similar to previous project and how the sidewalk, the slope of the sidewalk was designed with the pedestrian in mind versus the car.
Yes, sir.
So I don't know.
I think that I'm not opposed to having any garage doors facing 7th Street. It appears from the way that I can kind of piecemeal the elevations together in my mind that it's the majority of the facade. Maybe an entire elevation showing all of 7th Street composed together would be helpful.
Okay.
don't think, this is like showing the elevation of each one of the right, okay.
Right.
So it's hard to imagine what 7th Street is really going to look like when we see just the facade of each building separately.
Were we given any information on what these garage doors are?
Yes. Let me flip back through, let me get to it. So there's the garage door for C, which has the, correct me if I'm wrong,
It has the glass.
The ones with the glass in them. And let's see, where's the other one? There's B and D, which also has glass in it as well. There's A and E. So they all have glass in them.
I think that this is a high-end garage door. And am I correct that this is also where you're having your natural gas lanterns? Is that flanking the garage doors?
Yes.
And there's a whole lot of detailing that's obviously above a builder's grade type. So it's kind of a luxury experience.
Yes.
I don't see that as a problem. I really like the project. I would love to see the overall with all the garage doors, but I think that when I do, that it's considering the material palette you're using and the types of higher-end finishes, I think that it's going to be pleasant.
Yeah, I like the garage doors. I didn't realize that's what that was. And I just want you to know, it took me 30 minutes. My office is 1 block from these on the other side of Broadway. 30 minutes to go look at your lot yesterday because of all the detours.
I'm sorry?
All the detours between
yes.
crossing Broadway.
Just to go back to my point on the sidewalk at 7th Street, is that something that could potentially just come back to staff to?
Normally it would,
Okay.
and, there's regulations about the minimum width it has to be, and it depends on where it's located as far as if it's adjacent to the curb, which is not where we want it to be. And it has to be wider if it's adjacent to the curb. But there is also allowances for reducing the width of it if there isn't room to get a 5-foot sidewalk. So
Would you be open to continuing to work with staff specific to the design of the sidewalk at 7th Street?
With approval and then continuing to work with them for the design of the sidewalk, is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Absolutely, I'll do whatever.
yeah, because the sidewalk could be done as administrative revision
Yeah.
to the CA.
Would that also include the landscaping for the frontage? Is that something that is?
The issue that, when I looked at this, yes, it wouldn't, there's street trees if there's room to put them in. And so a lot of that depends on, you have a driveway, a 2-car wide driveway, and you have a 25-foot wide lot, and I'm not really sure there's actually going to be any room for us to be able to get a street tree. But that's something that we would look at.
If there is, we want to put them there.
You're going to do a
Yes.
developed landscaping that matches the rest of the design? Okay.
Do we have any other comments or questions from the committee? Would anyone else here like to speak to this? Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that the applicant install sidewalks on the northeast 7th Street frontage to be reviewed and approved by staff, that the applicant obtains a variance from the Board of Adjustments from the prohibition of primary access from the alley.
That was Blatt and Harding. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
No, or aye, no, opposed.
We have one nay. Okay, and I believe we need another motion.
Make a motion to provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustments for variance from the prohibition of primary access from the alley.
That was Blatt and Harding again. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 6E, 1216 Classen Drive. Is applicant present?
Okay. So I guess we should say we saved the best for last. It's all relative. The largest project. As you can see from the project site area, this is what I would call the infill, one of the infill part of the Villa Teresa project. And it involves renovating one of the existing structures, which is a two-story garage apartment that was constructed back in the early 20s, I think 1922. And that structure is behind the yellow house. So it's this structure right here. So in the staff report, there are several things that we talk about, and I'm just going to, some of them are going to come up as I look at pictures. One of the issues comes that they're going to need a variance because of building setback. On Classen Drive, you might notice on their site plan that the building is clearly back more than 10 feet. And the reason that I'm pausing on here is staff supports that because we're wanting to kind of protect the view that you've always had of Villa Teresa. As you come down Classen Drive and, you know, they've got the fence and you have the structures. And we felt that having the building at the corner, which is in this area, set back more would actually help retain that view that you've always had as you drive down historically in that area. So that normally staff doesn't necessarily support when buildings are set back more. So I just wanted to point out why that we're doing that. The other issue with the setback also involves the buildings along, let me get to here, Dewey. Right now, if you've ever walked down the road, and I think a comment was made the other day, it's not a very inviting experience when you walk down the sidewalk right now along this. There's a retaining wall, there's a change in grade, we've got the chain link fence, and because I walked the whole thing when I was out there taking pictures. And so their proposal to actually, and I'll get to their layout, to actually change that with the layout, there we go. Change that with the layout of the buildings instead of having them right up on either the property line or the 10-foot line. I think at an angle like this really adds interest and really adds to the pedestrian experience just with that layout versus if they were just straight along the road, just my humble opinion. So some of the items that we pointed out in staff report, in addition to the variance that they need for the setback, we have an issue with a feature that they're proposing involving the retaining wall projecting higher out of the ground. And once it's above the level of grade, it becomes a fence/wall. And we're very specific on what's allowed in our front yards in the downtown area, and we only allow open fencing, decorative metal. And so we had to point that out, and we've had discussions with their intent and what they're trying to do, and I'm sure that that explanation will come from them. But I wanted to point that out, and they provided let me get to the drawing if I can find it. They provided a drawing during the discussion, and so what we're talking about is when you look around it and there's a little brick, especially in this area, and you see how it's essentially you're looking at it and you go, oh, they have a brick fence, which we don't allow solid fences. And I'll say about half of that is above grade be it the patio surface or be it dirt. And we go from the high side, not the low side. So that is something that we pointed out. We have a concern because we don't want the pedestrian experience, we don't want pedestrians to be closed off. But on the other hand, you look at the fact that while these are attached, these are someone's homes, not like they're a business. And so there's a balance that you have to find with how open should it be if it's someone's home. So I wanted to point that out to you, and there's and I'm trying to get to where that went to. They provided us some information that shows the distance, how much above grade that they're proposing with their solidness, I'll say. And we were looking at different things such as this. So as I said, we're looking at the high side. We don't look at the low side. So it's how much is above the grade on the high side. And in this particular one, you see somebody sitting out on their porch, and they have the open fence on top of the wall, kind of trying to show you what, if you're sitting on your porch and you're looking out, or someone's sitting there, and the view that somebody might have walking down the sidewalk. So I'm sure we'll have more discussion of that. So that is something that they would need a variance for as well. The guidelines listed in here for discussion, there's numerous ones, and I don't need to necessarily discuss all of them. One thing that I'm just going to point out is that the guidelines dealt with renovating the garage apartment, and let me go back to its location. The current garage apartment, and to me I was fascinated that they actually could come up with these drawings. So this is I'll say it's the original, because if you look at the pictures, you'll see it got added onto in the back, and it doesn't look in this condition. But it matched the house that's in front of it. And so the end result is going to be, because it's in this location, it will be unrecognizable. And there's two ways to look at that. One is maybe it could serve as a transition between the new and the old if more of the old was left. On the flip side, it could serve as a transition from the old to the new because it's become all new. And I guess it all depends on your perspective, how you look at that. But I know everybody looks on that differently. We're all excited that the other ones, which will be coming in at some point, are going to be renovated, and they will still look the way that they look now. So with that in mind, I'll ask if you have questions, because there is quite a lot. I will point out on the driveway, and they did provide some additional information, and I don't think we've had that discussion here. They're proposing a new driveway, and the issue that we've got is there's an existing driveway to the church up to the north. They're working with them on trying to do a shared driveway, which is great. So you will see that we're recommending a condition that either they have a shared driveway or that they maintain 100-foot separation center line to center line, which the functional classification plan calls for, so that to allow those entrances to function better. And I think from the perspective of the church and this development, it's going to work out better if they do get that shared driveway resolved. So you will see staff is recommending approval subject to the variance from the requirement for the first 2 floors have to be within 10 foot of the street right-of-way, and that's from both street frontages. We're asking that they redesign the retaining walls to cap the height of the bricks at the highest grade, thereby eliminating the need for a variance. And that's staff recommendation, but I'm sure that will be up for discussion. And then, as I mentioned, that they provide either a minimum of 100-foot separation or a shared driveway with the church. We go on to say that we recommend approval to the Board of Adjustment for a variance from the setback, but we don't support the variance from the fence height and material, and that's coming from staff.
Thank you. If you could, please state your name and any additional information you'd like to provide.
I'm Marva Ellard. I'm one of the owners of this property, along with Billy Woodring, who is here, and Spencer and Brian from Brian Fitzsimmons' office is here.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have any questions from the committee?
I do. So I think it's incredibly creative. I was just amazed when I saw the plan, because I didn't even relate Dewey to this building. But are you doing anything about the overhead wires along Dewey?
They're going to be gone. We're taking all the poles and all the wires down, burying all the utilities, replacing the sidewalk, replanting street trees, doing landscaping between the sidewalk and the retaining wall. So, as Laura said, it should be a completely different feel.
Just those utilities alone is going to make a
Pretty awful, aren't they?
huge difference.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to weigh in on the section through the retaining wall. If we could pull that up again.
Yep.
Personally, I'm in favor of what's being proposed.
That, and we have a different, okay, we'll do that one.
As far as the height of the brick relative to both the patio at the residences and the pedestrians at the sidewalk. I think the height of the brick is at the right point where you have visual continuity for the pedestrian from the sidewalk, and really a lot of the interaction with the building will be from that point up with the rest of the building, while maintaining a level of privacy for the residents at that patio. I'm concerned that if the height of that brick were lowered to the level of the patio floor, that those patios would actually be less used, and that those residences would feel maybe a little too exposed to sit out there. So just to weigh in on that item, I think what is drawn works, and even when you look at the elevation down the street and the way that the houses angle and approach the property line, it's not a continuous wall down Dewey the whole way, that you have breaks in this wall at each entrance to each property.
So I was just going to flip to this, because essentially it's like you could just keep flipping this on down the street, and so you can see where the porch structure is, and then there's a little area of grass, and then the sidewalk. So we had a lot of discussion on this.
So it would be my personal opinion to accept the design as proposed and provide a recommendation for a variance for that open fence requirement.
I agree with Corey to an extent. I think, does it range up to 3'6", and then if so, then at some points the height of the brick wall will be at 5 feet, which seems a little high. Like, I think that this section looks nice, and I would approve this section, but I'm wondering if it's at 5 feet, then.
Oh, you're talking on the
Sometimes
low
the
side?
brick wall will be at 5 feet.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
It's my understanding
Go ahead.
that the design team, so there's the Dewey frontage, and there's all the units. All the middle, the center big section is at the same level, and we'll have this section. And they're taking up the extreme difference at the north and south end. So the 5 feet will be at the
Most
south end.
extreme. And
Right.
Ms. Richards is correct. There is 1 or 2 parts where it's taller, but the farthest it ever extends above grade is 18 inches.
Okay.
And so probably 80% of it is lower, that whole middle section.
Pardon me, if you would contribute, just approach the microphone so that it's on the broadcast. And if you could state your name.
Spencer Wilson with Fitzsimmons Architects. Currently, And this will be the case for the final product. Only one townhome has the 5-foot condition that you're referencing.
Okay.
So all the rest of them will be at that 3-foot or lower mark.
Kind of goes down some from the north end to the south end, and so that's where it increases.
Well, I think, yeah, if only one or two have that high condition, where if you're standing on the sidewalk, it appears to be 5 feet, then it sounds reasonable to me.
I'll go ahead and weigh in on the carriage house as well.
Okay.
I think the design is in line with the design of the houses, and looking at the site plan, it appears that one of the houses will actually touch the carriage house. Is that?
One of the townhouses does touch the carriage house.
So with that adjacency and relationship, it makes sense to me to bring the character of the carriage house up to that of the homes, to have them all relate to each other as one building.
Yeah, if you see where the little hand is, that right there is the carriage, and it's literally it'll be attached to one of the townhouses.
Yeah, so it seems like there will be a vantage point from Dewey looking somewhat west to see the north facade of that carriage house in relation to one of the townhomes as well. Yep.
It is up that little walkway that Laura's pointing out. You can see it right there.
There.
I think this is I was just going to say, I think this is a great project and a great use of the site from a density standpoint. Would you be willing to share with us your intentions for the other buildings at this time?
Do we have a Classen Drive facade or a site plan? Those are flats. You all know that the building on the intersection of Classen Drive and Dewey are 6 for-sale condos on that. And then as we go west, there's a yellow stucco house that we call the Lowry House. Will either be 1 or 2 private residences. It's a for-sale. Everything is for sale. There's no rental on it. And then the schoolhouse building, we call that the schoolhouse flats, and there's approximately 11 flats in that range in size from about 800 square feet to around 1,200 square feet, and they're the size of a classroom. So we're hoping that we can attract some young professionals or empty nesters or single professionals or retirees that want to live in this part of town. And then as we go a little bit farther west.
Yeah, I don't have those. I've got pictures.
There's a relatively large red brick house.
There we go.
There it is,
Here,
Laura,
right
there. And at one time, we thought about it being in the residential phase, but now we've combined it with the convent in another phase that most likely will be a boutique hotel.
Wonderful.
And I wanted to introduce, many of you know Suzanne Broadbent, who's sitting in the back. She's a member of the HP Commission. She's also our neighbor. She's the current president of the First Unitarian Church, and so I think they like us quite a bit. Is that reasonable?
Yes, Suzanne Broadbent. I'm president of the church that you see in these pictures and drawings. And we are surrounded by Villa Teresa and have for several years now, with apprehension, worried about what was going to happen to that property, and we're thrilled with what Marva is suggesting. And I think the only thing that I need to speak to this morning is the shared driveway. We have no problems with the shared driveway. And in fact, we can't afford to fix the driveway. So we see this as a real plus for us, among some other shared uses or shared beneficial uses that we foresee working with Marva on in conjunction with the hotel and that sort of thing. So as the nearest neighbor and the one that is surrounded by Villa Teresa, we are very much in favor of the project.
Great. Thank you.
It's a great project. Thanks for bringing this before us. It's good.
And since they have to get the variance for the 10-foot setback, I just want to state that I'm also in favor of the 10-foot setback. The corner of each townhome hits the property line, and then the front yard is well-defined, so it keeps kind of that urban condition that I think the regulations are trying to promote. And also kind of activity in that front yard zone.
So the one thing, in listening to your discussion, there's, for the person who makes the motion, because I heard some support, now that we've clarified no taller than 5 foot on the brick retaining wall.
Yeah, and just for like one unit.
Right, and so the wording, because obviously since we recommended something different, you don't really have that wording. So the wording, I believe, that would be needed there is that the applicant obtains the variance from the Board of Adjustment from front yard fence height and material regulations.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that the applicant obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the requirement that the first 2 floors of new construction be placed at or within 10 feet of the street right-of-way, and that the applicant redesign the proposed curb cut and driveway on the North Dewey Avenue to provide either a minimum of 100-foot separation or measured from center line to center line to the existing driveway or shared driveway with the church. Second.
And one that, the wording that the applicant obtains a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the front yard fence height and material regulations.
That the applicant obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustments for the front yard fence height and material regulations.
That was a Blatt Harding motion. All those in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, and then I believe we need 2 more motions, and then the second of that would need to be in line with the condition for that fence.
Can I do them as one?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for a variance from the requirement that the first 2 floors of the new construction be placed at or within 10 feet of the street right-of-way, and for the fence.
From the front yard fence height and material regulations.
And from the front yard fence height and material regulations.
That was Blatt and Harding. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Project is approved.
Thank you.
We're very excited about it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, that wraps up cases for individual consideration. We have nothing noted on the agenda for other business. On to communications and comments from staff. No comments? Any other comments from committee members? Hope everyone had a nice Valentine's Day yesterday.
We do have a meeting next month. Obviously, we had a continuance, but we do have projects. And if you've been reading the articles, you will see some of those projects.
Great. So the next committee meeting is scheduled for Thursday, March 15th, 2018. Applications need to be submitted by February 13th, 2018, and any revisions to continued projects submitted by February 20th, 2018. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.